Hello, and welcome back to the Seattle Design Festival Block Party Debrief. I am Trevor Dykstra, one of your hosts, here this week with Tyler.
Hi, Tyler. Hi, everyone.
And this week we are going to be talking to Clay Anderson, he's an architect at Olson Kundig. He's been involved with the festival for a very long time, not quite since the beginning, though maybe, well, I guess we'll ask, but I think, if I remember right, you said earlier, 2014. So we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff this year, and I'll bring him on right now. Hey, Clay, how are you?
Hello, thanks for having me. How's it going?
Pretty good. So let's start with last year's installations. This is 2022, and then we'll go back in time as we talk here.
Sounds good.
And I'm going to let you describe to us what your installation was while we're here.
Sure.
Rather than tell you.
Yeah, this was entitled Soundscape. Pretty fun. It was about an 8x8 kind of footprint. This came out of a competition we had at Olson Kundig, a crit competition where we asked kind of the whole office to come together with the festival theme and kind of pitch ideas. I think we had about 10 different submissions from folks. This was by Connor Urich, kind of presented this one to the group, and that simple concept, he loved the idea of the kind of string can telephone and the idea of kind of acoustics and being able to talk to somebody and kind of the just that concept of kind of simple kids game, right? And how we can kind of scale that up to the scale of the festival and kind of having it down in South Lake Union. So of course it's an easy concept, but then how do you do it with an 8x8 space? How do you do it with knowing that you're going to have like hundreds and thousands of people walking around? So this ended up being 1,000 cans, which was pretty fun. That we had the office ended up having to source, clean, sort, donate, all the good stuff. And you're kind of seeing it here. The idea was also getting a dialogue, kind of a prompt, right, for people to kind of talk to each other. Maybe they were strangers, maybe they were friends that just happened to be walking through. So we tried to also there was 30 active cans, or maybe 50 active cans, and then they're strung together, but you're 8 feet apart, and you don't realize once the wall was totally opaque, it was almost like, what do we do now? So we kind of had to gamify it, right, and add the kind of prompts, right, to get people thinking, and also as a way so you'd know where the other can was. You kind of have to locate your friend by the prompts, if that makes sense, or whoever you were talking to. But yeah, that was kind of the gist of it. I think the fun part was just trying to have for people to like kind of get it or not get it, right, and kids that don't even know what a string can telephone is, and like having their parents try to tell them what the concept was, or when they just got it, right. I think the fun part is making their own game out of it, like the acoustics of just hitting the can and like listening to the noises, or I think people plucking the can strings, right? It would kind of became kind of an instrument. And I think even the wind, right? Like I think air would kind of whip through this thing and make some some oddities, right?
Stringed instrument.
We also had music, kind of odd animal noises, because that was really weird, like just playing weird noises into some of these with a little Bluetooth receiver. But yeah, that was the kind of the main concept. We worked with Dow Built on this one to help fabricate the frame with us, and painting it blue blood, which was fun. Sherwin-Williams blue blood. And I guess this one was fun because sourcing the cans and trying to figure out how not to make this wasteful was probably one of the most interesting parts of this one.
Yeah, they've all got a nice copper sheen inside. Was that just luck? I mean, like you found something with...
No, we knew it needed to be a tomato soup can to get the copper finish. We had I think the pea cans are kind of like a yellowy gold, and we really wanted that gold. So we had to, we reached out to Safeway, and it was actually harder to source them and then find somebody that would take. We didn't want to just buy cans also and just recycle a straight up. You can buy an aluminum can, but it didn't give us. It didn't. They were just silver and didn't have the copper. So it kind of became part of the story of the piece, which was fun. And basically we ordered like 2 pallets full of these from Safeway, and then the tricky part was then how do we who would take, once we've opened it, who will take the goods, it's like, we
Yeah.
didn't want to just, not let that go to waste. So
True.
that became a part of it. We partnered with OSL, Organic Sack Lunches in Belltown, which is pretty cool. And they serve like thousands of people in need in King County. And that was pretty cool. That was, honestly, we had a group of like 10 folks from our office go down there to their kitchen. They gave us the space. We had area to kind of dump into 5-gallon kind of drums. So it became its own kind of assembly line, washing, cleaning the cans out, and then kind of re-prepping them. So the behind the scenes on this one was actually pretty fun. But the food ended up going to, they said about 6,000 meals for people in town, which we were kind of shocked by, that they were able to take 1,000 tomato cans and you kind of use that for pastas and enchiladas and other things, which is pretty cool.
That's great. I mean, we're always wondering about how the installations live on and what kind of, because these are temporary structures and what's the afterlife of them after the festival. So it's great. That's a great kind of aspect of this, is that it kind of went to feed people. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, we knew with the cans there, just being in Seattle, it's like they gotta mean something or have a little bit of a story to them. But we honestly, just finding that somebody that could take them and utilize them, that was kind of the struggle at first, just with the food hygiene parts of it all. But yeah, it was nice because and they all got recycled, right? Because this is actually a really high recycled content, which was nice. That's funny you said the structure. Actually, we loved it. We don't have photos of it without the cans on it, but it kind of looks like a giant, I don't know, kid's toy or like a recycling bin itself, which we didn't even, people after, it's funny, you pick a color, you're like, oh, this looks cool. And then we're like, oh, so because of recycling, or we're like, oh, we didn't even think about it because of that. But it was kind of funny. It ended up being kind of like that recycling blue, which is kind of funny. But the structure actually is back in our office, and we've kind of turned it into like a kind of a reading nook. We painted some chairs blue as well, and it's kind of outside one of our conference rooms, which is kind of fun. So even the structures kind of lived on a bit.
Was it modular? How did you get it out on site?
It's actually 4 kind of U-shaped pieces, right? They kind of bolt together. So you can kind of see it there. And then they basically each piece is a kind of the connecting either top or bottom, right? But yeah, it was actually, I gotta say, it was one of the easier ones to launch because it was actually pretty light, right? It was just the ribs, the plywood ribs, and then the cans weighed practically nothing. So it was actually really easy to launch, which was nice too.
And then you stringed the cans on site.
That was the time. That was the time consuming part. Getting the structure there was not so bad, but we had a kind of coding system to no to go. They were like pre-strung on one side, but we had to, only one of the sides could be strung, if that makes sense, because it had to be done as a cube. That was I forgot about that part. It took a little bit of time.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's relatively simple kind of when you look at it, but there's each thing begets a new kind of problem. Like you talk about, like, sure, there's cans on both sides, but how do people know where to talk? And so, okay, you gotta invent a thing for that. And then prompting them to understand what it is, and there's a thing there, and like
I do like how it's very conceptually very clean and simple, right? Like, I mean, for those who know, that kids kind of game, that it was very obvious. You approach it, you knew what to do, right? You didn't really need a prompt.
Right. Exactly. And we actually wanted that this year. I think in years past, it's like there's signage and things you need to do to explain it. I think the ones that there's like the clarity of just, or maybe you figure it out, I think is super fun. I do think this one had a little bit of there. We kind of went on a limb. We're like, I think people will figure this out. And, I think it kind of works. But I always love them when they need almost no storyline to it, right? Or you make your own story for it.
Yeah, it's really intuitive, I think.
Sorry, we have a co-host here. I don't know why he's decided.
Mine's sitting next to me over here off camera.
Mine is in a different room. He would be.
She keeps standing on the keyboard, so hopefully we don't drop out. This was. Let's see. There was some text. You did end up with a little bit. I thought the clever sort of.
Yeah, I think that was mostly, we actually had a little bit of a QR code to donate to the organic sack lunches, which you always like to do. We did end up adding a little bit just to give Dow built a little, obviously our partners are obviously so important for these projects. So yeah, just a little bit. But we thought about kind of embedding more info, and I think we had a little bit about how much food was served there. But yeah, we tried to keep the bare minimum for sure.
What why did you decide to partner with Dalbuilt? Like what was the deciding factor, or was that something like right from the get-go you decided?
They actually the later project you'll see Home Base, we worked with them on for that, and it was kind of, you know how it goes, just trying to find a contractor that'll help you with these crazy ideas. And it was kind of like, hey, you guys, we're doing something else this year. Would you be interested? And actually, it's funny. Catherine Rainieri, she was at Olson Kundig for a long time, and now she's at Dalbuilt, and she helped with both projects and the team there. Anyway, so there's a little bit of that, right? Like continued kind of friends
History.
in the industry, which is always makes it helpful. But yeah, the contractor part is obviously always the struggle, right? Or trying to find those people. So once you got somebody that is interested and willing to go out on the limb on something that's weird with you is always helpful.
I think I have a ton of photos here, so I'm clicking through.
That's great.
Well, you that was a good segue that I mentioned. You've done other ones. I have the year before last here, which I guess, speaking of partnering with an org. And
yeah, no, this is great. Yeah, so Camp United We Stand. This one's an interesting one too. So this one was actually a project in the office that a team was doing, we were doing pro bono, helping this organization in Seattle. They basically they're a nonprofit that hosts, they basically have sanctioned encampments, and they kind of partner with churches or parking lots or places in town, and they put people up for a certain period of time. So they'll have like a 30-member community in a church parking lot, and it's for like 3 months. They came to us, and one of my colleagues, Ekram, helped put this on and kind of spearhead this, which was great. So it was already we were already trying to ideate how to like help them with a temporary housing solution within their kind of the framework of these things have to move all the time. They have to move quick. People have to be able to do this with no construction experience. So it was kind of fun. Like the team, I wasn't even a part of it, but the team was already early on designing this thing, which was fun. Ikram and I prompted the office. We're like, hey, Seattle Design Festival, what a great way to maybe build this thing. I mean, I think that's just one of the opportunities, Seattle Design Festival, with firms in town that can be fantastic, is testing ideas, right? And I think for us, this was an exciting way to say, let's take this from paper and for a rendering and help a group that's in need, right? That actually can use the structure. So it worked out pretty well timing wise. We kind of were already like 80% through the design of this thing. Obviously, not having a builder on board yet, that there was a lot to work out, which made it fun too. But again, Dalbuilt was involved in this one to help us build it. We kind of exploded. You're seeing the kind of wall module exploded here to kind of actually create a pretty intense. This one, we actually went the opposite way, right? It was like we wanted people to understand who Camp United We Stand was, what their mission was, and a little bit about like how the modules came together. This one was pretty heavily based on these little kind of 2x4 modules, and using kind of commodity goods that you could buy. Everything at Home Depot was kind of one of their asks, right? So yeah, you're seeing the wall kind of exploded here, but basically it's a panelized construction that is supposed to come together in a pretty short amount of time. We used kind of a polycarbonate window material. There was kind of these little pivot windows we worked on for them that were also part of the module. Kind of a tarp piece that became kind of the roof or shelter for this thing, so they could just pull it down or replace it when it came off. Yeah, so this was a fun one. And I think the other part that was kind of cool about this one is the exterior, which you're kind of seeing the panels back there. We partnered with 2 artists in town, Aaron Shigaki and Scott Mezcal, and they had a Black Lives Life Matter. Well, Black Lives Matter.
Yep.
God, let me see if I can get that right. Let's see, mural down at the Kobo building in the ID. And you guys have probably seen this one. It's a really beautiful mural. They both collaborated on it. It's got like all these shades of blue, which is pretty fun. You're seeing the blue and the green on the side and some exposed area. And it was kind of nice. It was like that time when the protected storefronts were starting to come down. So it was like, hey, are you guys using this materials?
Yeah.
And we loved the idea of like kind of creating this almost graffiti kind of exterior facade instead of just doing plywood or just painting it, right? So that became kind of a fun partnership with them to kind of work on it. We ended up kind of just grabbing the modules and the paintings and just kind of haphazardly adding them back into the modules. There was no real rhyme or reason to it, except for that it kind of just looked fun. But that was also kind of a fun, I think the timing with this, you know, and like, I think, was this one of the first years after
this was
pandemic?
Or, this is the first block party after the pandemic. Yeah.
Right. So that,
well, or not after lockdown.
After lockdown, right. So it was kind of fun a little bit for us to celebrate, right? That everybody's kind of coming back together. And it was like these storefronts that have kind of been boarded up, they're kind of coming back down. So there's something about that made it fun to this one as well.
Yeah. So these are both the last two have been the ones at Lake Union Park. We're going to look at some others elsewhere in the city. Is there anything based on that site or just in general that you'd share as advice for other folks, what to expect, or things maybe you didn't realize about it until you got into?
Yeah, good question. I think it's got a mix of grass, gravel, sometimes pavement, right? So I think that's always a struggle. We always want, you know, working with you, Trevor, you're always like, nope, you're not. You can't put anything on the ground.
Go there.
You can't, yeah, it's got to be weighted down, which is fun. It's always these parameters. You're like, wait, how are we going to do this with, you know, blocks or footings?
Especially as architects, right? Like we're used to like building
anchoring things,
and everything here is like like
which, you know, the old site in Occidental, it did make, you know, it's like his, you know, brick, and it did make it easy, but in some ways it's actually kind of more forgiving here and probably more level than the brick stuff, you know, like
the brick had a crown.
So in some ways it kind of, I guess in some ways it's actually maybe easier, but I think for people to start understanding how to actually work, I mean, I think that's probably the hardest part. It's got to be a freestanding, you know, structure. That's, you know, that's always the hard part, right? Especially with some of the designs people present. It's like, ooh, how are we going to do this? So
that's a good example.
I do. I mean, I don't know. It's nice though. I do feel like something about South Lake Union Park here kind of has a little bit more international feeling or something to it, you know. I mean, it's got this kind of, you just have the area to move around, I think, which is really nice.
There's
right?
more space, right? We lose a little bit of that urban street, which maybe that's a good segue to look at. We'll start with the stuff you shared here.
Oh yeah.
From
I was thinking this was actually, I have been doing this for I guess a decade now.
Yeah, so this is the second
2013, which
this
is
the second year.
Yeah. Which is really funny. It's funny to look back on.
So that's so you were in the design jam then. So the design jam in the second year of the festival was a furniture competition. It's the proto version of the installations, or how we treated those. The installations you see in the photos behind here are actually just by a team internal to the festival, myself and Jeremy and Krakow Jenny. A lot of people who've been involved since Krakow Jenny's, etc. But the ones brought by the members of the community were these furniture bits. So this was you. I didn't realize that the tires.
I had to look it up too. I was like, what did I know I did something. But it's funny, the octahedrons back there, you can see it, right? That LMN did. And this was like, I was interested in being involved, and there was a few of us at LMN that kind of weren't doing the octahedron, but we're like, let's get involved with the design festival in some way, you know? And I think, the furniture component, we were like, you know, obviously like, let's do something, which is funny. It's like, how can we do something recycled, something that's almost free, right? Which is kind of fun. It's like, oh, we got these tires, we got some nylon string. Can we make some chairs and seating out of them?
Yeah, I think we had like a list of materials, and you could add one thing or with some really complex design problem.
But it's like you needed a drill bit. You know, we kind of made some rims, some spinners out of these things, which is kind of fun. But it's funny. This is like a really good example of, I think, launching a weird idea And then like
Yes.
the kids rolling these things like was so unexpected, but they loved playing with them as like an
Yeah.
object, which is I think honestly one of the things I love about the festival and just launching a weird idea into the public realm. It's like you never know who's going to do what with it. And obviously it's nice to see people were actually sitting in them, like kind of how we thought. But then
Yes.
it's like the kids that were just like they were probably rolling him into other kids, and knocking them down and doing.
Well, it's funny how like the first year we did this was very much kind of like, oh, these are gallery spaces and like don't touch this and then
and it's
pretty
just scrappy.
quickly learn like through all these years of like, oh yeah,
Right.
no, things are gonna get moved and touched and like
Totally.
Well, yeah, and this example as well as the example you had from last year. I mean, they both have a very interactive component to them, right? And
Right.
this one as well, right?
Yeah. And then it's funny. This one I had to do all my research on this one. It's been so long, but this was part. Trevor, you'll have to correct me. This was part of. Was this also part of what was called the Rumble? Was it? Or?
Yeah, I can do a little. So the one we just saw before. So the design festivals or the block party of the design festivals gone for this year will be the 10th or 11th year. So it's gone for more than that because of COVID, etc. So this was the third year of the block party. First 2 years, really, if you wanted to be part of it, building something, you had to be part of the festival committee itself in order to really do something. We found other orgs to do stuff. And then we had this furniture competition, which we just looked at. Third year, it's like, well, this furniture competition was great. Is there a way to broaden that? The real kind of driver was that octahedron or the LMN piece.
Right.
It's like, great, we had somebody, we just told them, go ahead and bring something in, and it worked out. And so this year was a test of that. We really were feeling like, well, these are big, complex things, and we wanted a way for anybody in the community, not just a business, to be able to kind of come together with other folks in the community and build something. Right. So this was, hey, we got a bunch of contractors, and anybody who wants to be involved, as long as they show up on this first day, can kind of join a team and then work with these contractors. And I think we also had a nonprofit. It was like a 3-way thing.
Yep.
Nonprofit as well, as the client.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of loosely what I remember. That sounds right. And I remember this one. I had a friend, Matt Noreen, who had a men's apparel company called Tarboo down in Pioneer Square, and I pitched it to him. I was like, hey, if we come together, we could pitch an idea for like textiles and architecture. He was like, I'm totally in. This sounds so fun. And I remember we were, I think, in LMN's offices, and I think that's where the Rumble happened. And we just presented I think we had like a minute to present, we had like some ideas of projects that had like architecture and fabrics and weaving, and we just pitched some ideas, and then teams kind of came to us and we pitched I think 6 different times, right?
Yeah.
And then teams then formed. I remember it was all designers and folks in the community. And then they kind of came back to you and were like, hey, I'm interested. Can I join this team? You're like, sure, we'd love to have you. But it was really fun. It's really funny because I met some of some closest friends in Seattle through this. Amy O'Carroll, that's at Go See Studio, was one of the people that was like, hey, I'm interested in doing something with you all. And Sarah Kia, who was at Olson Kundig at the time, now lives in Colorado. And it's just funny. It's like, this kind of haphazard group of people come together, which was really fun. I think there was something about this year and the dynamic of forcing different folks that actually the later projects I worked on kind of were in that same vein, that kind of just ran with the things we liked about this, right? And working with folks you never worked with before.
That was the beauty of these 2 years we did this Rumble was, I mean, there's the reasons why it doesn't exist anymore is because it put it all on the contractor partners, and that's very difficult. But it got to the heart of what we wanted, which was, cross discipline teams and kind of working with folks you don't know. And like you said, you're meeting people, which is, we could get into that off of why I started a whole other nonprofit to do this sort of stuff for that kind of energy of it's just random folks. There's plenty of downsides to it. Your team, everything came together pretty well. I know some of the others, they had multiple people with really strong ideas, and they couldn't ever come to
well, it is. That's the trick, right? But when the magic happens, it's pretty fun.
Yes.
But this one, I mean, this one this was so fun. Amy actually produced. I remember she had this little we all came together, had some ideas, and Amy brought this little long rocking tube sock thing. And we're like, she pitched the idea and we're just like, this is brilliant. This is perfect. Let's do a giant rocking tube. And I remember you guys were really freaked out, or we were too, because it was like liability. It was
this is the first time. So this is the first year we've trusted other people beyond the LMN one, and that was a team of folks that we already knew that we kind of had trusted. So this year it's random, and our real thoughts are always going towards, okay, how is this going to get us sued?
Well, it's all the things. It was like little kids rolling around and like a big giant plywood chopping block.
I mean, this is a great example. I mean, I don't know if I can zoom in further, but of kind of the development of the rules that we now have today.
Right.
And you can see, we were worried about the scissor kind of point, getting underneath there.
Yep.
When it tilts up and down, and the solution here of just kind of fencing it off as a way of keeping those areas safe and stuff, and that's led to kind of a standard rule, and now it's and a way we describe it now that is understandable,
right? And the bench, it's funny,
things.
The bench wasn't part of the design either, but it was like a way we'd have to keep pushing the bench tight to it, right? But it was a way that a kid wouldn't there was all that hill area where a kid's foot could kind of get there, anybody's really foot could get there. Yeah, all these little things that we had to kind of work around and get some of your guys' worry and ours is,
Well, I think everybody has the same. It's usually not a thing of where we're completely on a different page from anybody else.
Exactly.
But it also goes to this idea of you have an idea, and then there's all these problems the idea creates that you have to solve when you do it. It's never just kind of the sketch.
Totally.
I mean, most of us have this in day-to-day work as well, but with these installations, right, there's a kind of additional problem solving that has to occur throughout.
Yeah. But this was fun. I remember the frames of that one, we CNC milled it, glued them together. We tried to use a little minimal waste we could, and I think this one even somebody on the team ended up taking one of the modules. Again, there was kind of a module to Burning Man one year, which was really funny. I was like, well, good for you all for taking.
It's a great Burning Man. Yeah,
I think it was used as the staff hangout. People slept and lived on this thing. That were it was one of those. It was I was the fact that you guys trucked it to Burning Man, that's amazing. Good for you.
It has a real deal afterlife.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me flip to the next. So I forgot this was you.
Yeah, this was and this is kind of a carryover.
This is Rumble. This is second Rumble, right?
Yeah, and I remember I worked with Rob Dean on this one, who's done a lot of the design festival work too, right? He's actually back there in the photo. Also, Garrett Reynolds, who's actually at Olson Kundig now, and a few other folks I'm missing on this one. But this one was fun. It was kind of the same thing. It was a bunch of designers came together, right? And I don't know how prescribed this one was, or we just kind of, was this also part of the Rumble, or I can't remember.
I think this one, man, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I think this is a Rumble year still. This is the last year of that.
And maybe that's what it was. Maybe Rob and I came together because we had met each other at the festival, and I can't.
It would be the 2015 one.
Yeah. But this one it's funny. We just kind of created. We were, all these apartments and small housing things were coming online, and we were just wanting to have a discussion of what people thought about living smaller in the city and what that meant. So obviously it gave us an excuse to do a fun little A-frame and wood slats and. The cool part was the idea was that we had these little plastic shingles, right? And everybody we wanted people to again, how do we get people to interact with this thing? And it was you'd have people draw, sketch, and it was all based on living what they would give up or what they needed to have to live small. It was kind of a fun, and then we took photos, everybody with their ideas and concepts, right? It was just kind of, the idea was having people kind of schmather this thing and clad this thing in the shingles, which was just kind of fun just to see what people's thoughts were and how they wanted to live and how they could live small. But obviously super simple. We just had some little benches that actually were the kind of structured that things so it didn't topple over, right? And then a little bit of infographics on the inside of what to do, because this one needed a little bit more prompt, right, for folks.
Yeah, I think that lived on somewhere as well.
Did you also partner with a contractor for that one?
That one, I think we worked with, I think Walsh Construction helped.
Yeah, that if that was a Rumble one, it would have been another prescribed.
Yep. That was Walsh that helped us with that, which was really great and helped us kind of with the space. Obviously, getting the space to do these things is like, that's almost the most premium, unless you're doing it in somebody's got a garage, which is also premium, right? It's like, I think they found us some kind of a little workshop that we were able to build in, which was really great, and kind of transport this thing. We ended up launching this one in Ballard too, which the idea was to go neighborhood to neighborhood. I think we only made it to like 1 or 2 spots.
Oh, that's right. I remember this. Yeah, because we had parking day was part of the festival.
Yeah, exactly. It was parking
day. Or like
day
super parking day or whatever we had called it.
Exactly. Like, on Ballard Ave, which was fun because it was, obviously, downtown had a different, message, and then Ballard had their own kind of ideas of what it meant to be there. And we kind of wanted to keep going, but obviously
the modules were sized like they fit in a car space.
Exactly.
I remember this all coming back.
Exactly. Somehow it worked out.
I mean, you touched on something that design teams need to think about. Teams that are new.
Audio cut.
Oh no! Can you hear me?
Good. You can do it again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. So you touched on something that new design teams really ought to think about, and it's just some of the feasibility of their designs and making sure you have the space to build something before it gets shipped out to site. It's not something we often think about as designers, but
the space and then is it a pickup truck you're going in? Is it
you have to design
how do you
to
transport
your own constraints, right? Like I design everything to fit at one point into a Honda Element, and it's like there's some weight limitations and everything.
The inflatables make it a little easier, right?
That's why we do inflatables, right? Was because we had no space. Right. So we build them in a park, and then they can fold up and fit in the back of the car.
It's brilliant.
As things have gotten bigger, when I do installations, it's become a lot like the storage and build space problem does not end, regardless of how many times you've done that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, designing for modularity and making it be able to collapse and be assembled quickly and that sort of thing. All those things need to be thought out.
So this is probably the most famous one you've done. I mean, I hear about this one still. The people go the Ice Cube year. This one blew up.
This one
because
went viral and
it got installed early.
Yeah. No, it's funny. It's still talked about in the office too, and it's got like how do you out ice cube the ice cube? There's like
it's such a simple thing,
And that's honestly that this one also, this is the year I kind of moved over to Olson Kundig and kind of had pitched this idea to do something for the festival, and it became also the competition, which again I think we had like 12. We made it in our office. We had teams come together, and I think this is probably a little bit of origin to some of the team making right in the festival to some degree, but we asked people to work on groups of 4, 3 to 5 people. And we had like 12 different really fun ideas for how to work with, was it design change, I think was.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and so there's all these like fun ideas, and this one, I guess I kind of emceed it, but I also was like jumped on a team because I was like, I can't not participate in some way. And I'm working with the guys in the top corner there, Greg, Nakata, Jari, and Noah was kind of our little design team. And anyway, but in the crit, I'll never forget, we still talk about this. Like we had this idea for atmospheric and ephemeral and let the thing change during the festival, like through light filtering. And, I think we were like, is it cast glass? What is this? And Jim Olson was like, we called it like the ice cream. He's like, just make it out of ice. And we were all like,
this is why Jim's brilliant, though.
Yeah, we were like, that is so simple and so brilliant, and also kind of what we were trying to do. I don't know how we couldn't get there, but I think that was a testament to like making it like an open source within the office and like letting people participate. And anyway, and obviously at the end of the day, it was more about the logistics on this one, because at the end it was finding the ice cascade ice, right, and the modules kind of set, and how big 8x8 ice cube, right. But then we worked with Mateo, and you can't even see it in that photo, but we hung a light in those trees, right?
I have another shot here I can show.
Right, which was kind of Mateo did this amazing, you can see it up there. But it was, when you're walking around, you somehow it just blended in, like it was perfect. But then it, even in the daytime, it kind of created this aura to it.
It highlights it, which is why the photos of it all really punch. And so, so that's an example of something, right, where like, you wanted to do that, and I'm like, and we eventually went back to where, because you were going early, you could get your own permit for the space, And then that allowed you to work with the park and kind of assure them that we could do something like that, because logistically that's always hard to do stuff like that. But for other people hearing this, it does mean, yes, if you've got a really crazy idea that kind of falls outside of the parameters we give, you can always discuss it in advance with us. The problem would be if you showed up on the day of and just, oh, by the way.
The logistics
you know,
behind coordination and logistics obviously was a lot, like getting the parks department to allow this thing to melt, you know, like getting them to like the London plane trees are protected, and like all the things to show them that we weren't going to like ruin the trees or the canopy, right? Like all these things. They go above and beyond, but we knew we had to do it to make this kind of work, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I mean, I guess the deinstall is not that bad, but
that was great.
The install, you know, is a bit of
the drains were there. Yeah, it was the install, but then the nice part about, I mean, that's what was so cool about this one was like this kid's hand. Like, I don't know if you remember, but like people would push their hands into the.
I've got so many handprint photos and things.
And it was, again, not something you ever, you know, you launch these ideas and then like how people interact with it. Like we never would have anticipated the things people did to this, and like just like the little kids, the hands just kept going deeper and they became kind of cavernous right through the thing, and that kind of became the design. Once it melted, it became its own form and life, which was really fun. And
handprint there.
Other hand, but that was, I think that's the unexpected nature of how people reacted. And then, you know, Cliff Mass did like his blog post on it, and it was like,
and then it got it just got
it was like asking the public to like guess how long this thing would live in September sun, you know, in Pioneer Square. And it was really fun because I think it got kids, you know, there's a lot of school, like we heard like that there was like schools coming down here to like let their kids like guess. They were like using it in class to like guess the amount of time based on how much ice it was. And it was just kind of fun to
I remember
see.
You and I discussing via email and being like, oh, this could be like months, and then immediately like you put it in, it was like, oh, this is going really fast.
Well, and honestly, Trevor, that's funny because that was the reason I emailed Cliff Mass, because I was honestly like, I need like the permit I have is only for 2 weeks, and is that enough?
We were so worried.
It was like I was like, I need to know when we need to have this thing cleared, or am I gonna have to go out there with like a sledgehammer and like get rid of this thing? Or that was interesting. And I think Cliff Mass's team got it within like, I think they thought it would be like 18 days given like whatever factors, and I think it was like 11 days it ended up being there, but I don't think they were factoring the human
there's a lot of force,
which is pretty funny. But it was a factor of the permit time. It was like 2 weeks or a month was like double the cost or whatever.
Yes. Let's see. I think we got a couple more. Okay. Oh, I went too far. All right. So we jumped ahead then. So that for Ice Cube year, and then I guess you didn't do 2018.
No, but I do have lessons learned from that year.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
So I think that's to how do we out Ice Cube? How do we out Ice Cube the Ice Cube? I think was like the office was like, do we just wait a year? Like, what do we do? Like, people were into it, and it was like kind of magical and weird. We had in the office, we had another crit, and a guy, Christian Pools, in our office had this idea for that. It was called Leviathan, and we were going to hang the structure between our building, the two historic.
This was a huge idea too.
Massive, like it was like, all right, we're gonna go big if we're gonna do this, and it was like. Okay, it was like we were gonna it was all sonotubes basically, this huge sonotube structure that was gonna like kind of hang as like a giant chandelier between two historic buildings, right? And it was funny that that was the similar thing where it was like I needed Seattle Fire Department to give me approval because there's the trash department. It was both the building management companies, right, to say yes to we could hang on their historic building. And it was like it was just crazy. It was like the logistics times 4. And then at the end of the day, we were working with Extel Construction in town, and a friend of mine, I should say, Kirby Kelly, was helping as a project manager on that. But we couldn't get buy-off from anybody to actually like say this thing would be like, it was just like, it was too much. And like, if we had like a year to work on this,
it was like everybody wants all the engineering, and then there's got to be
exactly
experience.
And it was like we got so close, but it was like at the end it was like it was a timing and a liability thing, and It was funny. We just it was one of those that you really, the earlier you can start on these projects, right? Especially the crazier you go, the better, because it just goes by so quick from what is it,
Yeah.
from May through August. It's just such a quick timeline to pull some of
But
those things off.
but in playing where like stuff you've done has had influence on the festival, that did mean the next year is like, well, I've been thinking about, are there ways? Because I think in that year it got thrown, you pitched it. It's like, that's not something the festival can do really the legwork for you, aside from
Right.
saying, yeah, it's part of the festival, here it's on the
Right.
map. And it
Right,
was
right.
near the event, so it would have been some
Right.
co-producing. But really it was all on you. Then the next year we're like, well, this is great. We should have these bigger, longer things. The ice cube lasted for weeks, and that was
Right.
nice.
Right.
We liked the idea of it being there early, and that helped kind of hype up spots.
Yeah.
So we pitched the next year, and we did a thing where specific folks could do kind of a month and a half, 2 month long install around the town. But I think we ran into the same issues. So those things did happen, but the same sort of things are like, well, when it's there for 2 months, it's no longer kind of, when you're there for 2 days or 48 hours, you're around it, and like, it can take some abuse, like you're saying, all those kind of unforeseen things. When it's there for 2 months, you really do have to think about it's back to kind of being almost permanent architecture, and you have to think about all that. And for a bunch of those ones, we won't name names, but a bunch of those didn't, were designed as if it were 48 hours and like got immediately broke or immediately pulled apart, and like, so we're still trying to do that, but it did lead to a program, at least for the next year, where we were attempting to do something of that scale. And I think there's still a desire from everybody behind the scenes to bring something like that back, to like make that part, because there's something interesting about.
It is, and it's always so hard. It's like that weekend, it's like if you miss it, people are like, wait, is it still up? And you're like, oh, it's already gone. You're like, what? I didn't get a chance to check it out. So
it's finding some partnerships with the city or something. We gotta, there's gotta be a way to do it. That's the plus of these big events, is we have a permit for the space, and then nobody else has to worry about that. You just have to worry about dealing with us. With these other things, it's a little more tricky. You got to navigate all these other waters and which is a 6-month review from the parks department, and all that.
There's something interesting about kind of hyping it, getting it kind of people excited about something launching early, or even the staging of it. And I know you guys you've also looked at like different parts of town to activate, which is always interesting to kind of get other neighborhoods thinking about design, which is always exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And then did you do? Let me turn this back on. All right, so 2019. This is 2021 here.
Yep.
And then so you weren't part of the 2019 one then. The real change one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then this. Well, okay. What, Tyler? What are we missing? We've asked. I mean, you've given some good advice about things you would think would consider. Anything, I guess, over the years, are the things you dramatically would think, I really should have done that a different way? I mean, yours have all been pretty successful.
Or the other way to reframe that question is like, for new teams, what kind of advice would you give them? I mean, you've learned over the years, and you've done a lot of installations. I'm sure there's some advice you could give to somebody new coming on board that doesn't really know much about the festival and know kind of the nuances of building and installing and disassembling.
I mean, I think it was kind of a progression, right, for me to kind of start small and scrappy, and kind of then to find the partners over time that could help us execute these things. So I guess that would be the biggest thing. I think just like for younger folks, just starting with like a small team and just like getting your hands dirty and building something yourself, so you can kind of respect the folks that you find later that maybe can help you execute bigger ideas like this, right? The builders. But I think there's just something about trying something, and I think there's I know a lot of the University of Washington students do that, right? Where they kind of form teams and do it. But I think also just I think finding folks that kind of want to build your idea, right? Like that's always the hard part, like we talked about, is like and I think just emailing, kind of cold calling somebody and being like, hey, it's like that's scary, right, for a lot of people. And I think especially young folks that are like, oh, they're not going to say yes. It's like, well, they could say yes if you ask, if you don't ask, so I feel like that's always been the case. I think pushing the boundary a little bit of that, so you can try to, just try to get something done that's fun and different.
Yeah. I mean, to your credit, all of your ideas over the years they've been pretty clear. Even when you talked about the Tarbu thing, it's like maybe you don't know the idea, like what it is, but it's sort of like, I want to do this plus this.
Yeah.
Like a clear ask to somebody you're bringing in is always useful, I think, for sure.
Totally. I think that's true too. It's like a simple concept because, the more convoluted it is, like even this one it's a simple concept, but in execution, right, of all the cans and like pulling it off and like just sourcing stuff, that you're like, and it just becomes its own little mini project. So it's like the clearer, more simple the idea is, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes. But
Yeah.
I do think it makes it, you can keep the whole team and your partners on board if the message is clear and if the concept is clear, right? If it's kind of convoluted, people are like, well, this is probably okay, right? You're like, no, it's not. Like, look at the rendering, look at what we're trying to do, and like, this is not how the acoustics work. It's like the testing of it. I think it makes it easier.
Yeah, and that's another thing to maybe highlight is that if you are trying to push the boundaries and do something innovative or different, it's giving yourselves time to test it. And we've heard people doing mock-ups and
right.
And in addition, you mentioned having a clear concept, having something more or less simple to execute, maybe not simple, but like a clear
Right.
direction on how to do it, right?
Right.
And treating it, the other thing you mentioned is like treating it like a project, like a real project, right? And scheduling and getting your team together
Totally.
and staying on task, because there isn't a lot of time to
There isn't.
from the call to design to build it. It's a pretty small window.
No, I think that, and I think Tyler, you nailed it. I mean, I think I've always kind of treated it as like a real project, right? And I think it needs that, right, to be successful and to just execute on time. With this tight of a timeline, it has to happen like that, right? Like it just has to. Yeah. I always love the aerial shots of the festivals.
Those are great.
This is great.
That's one thing I do. One thing I like especially about Lake Union Park right now is we're able to, at least for the moment, get drone photos, which we never were able to do downtown. So
right. Yeah, it's fun.
There's some trade-offs in here. You can see the grass isn't as cool looking as brick and and everything, but being able to do some aerial things, which a lot of these things are designed kind of to be appreciated as an object itself too. So
and it's funny. This is actually a great point, Trevor, because the ice cube, we got up on ladders to get that shot of it, and I think it kind of animated, showed how impressive the festival was, really tight, and then how many people were surrounded by the ice cube. But I was thinking the same thing on this one, like just like you said, like as an object from above, if Trevor throws a drone up in the air, the thing's got to look cool on like the fifth facade there.
Right.
It's got
that's a new parameter with the new.
We talked about it. It was like, well, we don't need to put cans on the ceiling, and we're like, we have to put them on. It's like that's another 300 cans we need.
At least need along the perimeter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we didn't want the little kind of like bald spot on the top. We had to have it fully canned.
There's one from the year before that has that, the drone, the side shots, which is really great. Yeah. And then anything from aerial, you can see like, the top is not
it's been shaved.
The design.
But that's one thing that the park does afford is it's not as constrained in the site either, right? You have a larger space to build in, and you can go taller, you can go wider, there's a lot of flexibility.
And I think that's exciting because I do feel like it's funny that the soundscape one we were just looking at was a similar footprint to the ice cube, which is kind of funny. But
10 by 10.
It's funny that 10 by 10, you end up somehow it becomes like a parameter that you just keep working towards, even though it's like we have more room now.
We were so strict about that in Occidental, especially we got so big there.
Right.
There's just no space. And now we're in this huge park. It's the third largest park in the city. And it's just like, at the moment, at least, size is, everybody keeps asking, what's the size? It's like, well, just tell us what you want to do, and then we'll tell you if it's too big. But
I think that's one thing that is that for me that I've always the scale of that we tried that with the Leviathan and the scale of an alley, which was a little aggressive, but I still feel like going kind of big if you can do it. It's just it takes more resources and time
if
and
you can do it is a big thing.
Yeah. So, but that's always, I mean, I think thinking small and like really smart, but it also just like you're saying, you have the space. What can you do is kind of an interesting question too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The first year we were there, I think when folks found out they could do big stuff, there was a bunch that were just huge, the proposals. And then by the time they showed up on site, it all had kind of scaled back as reality set in.
Right. Yeah.
But it's interesting. I don't think last year we had anything quite to the scale,
right,
other than the pavilion that we've ever had. Everything is more modest and kind of circumspect.
Right.
So. Any other things to share?
I got one more question.
Go for it.
Is there anything that you could think of, because you participate in so many festivals, that could be improved with the festival?
Oh yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think what's cool is that every year the festival happens, I think it gets improved, right? So I think that's just the nature of it. I don't know. I guess I always think about how I think the festival kind of elevates Seattle in a way, right? So I think any way we can make design and Seattle as a design city kind of more of a strength, right? And I think that just it takes more money and more time and volunteers and like all the things we're talking about and like elevating the nature of some of these things, right? So I guess that's one thing I wonder if there was like a bigger, I know you guys do competitions and like you award different groups that maybe aren't able to participate, which I think is a huge part of it. It gives them a means to do it, which, and like in a lot of organizations they're scrappier and they just want to get their ideas out there. But I guess, even opening it up to the festival to maybe even a larger competition audience could be interesting, right? Like I think supporting small local groups and then thinking about maybe that there's something that you never would have expected to happen in Seattle.
That is a desire of ours, is to
Mhm.
certainly expand and get more and different types of people to help participate.
Yeah, and if we talk about evolution of the festival, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've been there almost since the very beginning. I've been there since the beginning. It's like the festival, of course, is led by a nonprofit behind the scenes, and that's had different folks running that nonprofit over the years. And like as each person brings in a different kind of emphasis, and lately the current person who's project manager for it really did a great job of spearheading the ability for the festival to provide grants, which is something sort of common for other events. But ours is sort of worked where folks want to participate and they're fine sort of doing it with their funding, but it leaves, like you're pointing out, leaves out lots of people, and so it's in a very modest way right now, but there is a program there, so that does lead, if anybody's ever listening, there's fundraisers and stuff for this organization. The more that we can raise, the more we can turn around and hand out as stipends. So there are stipends available for this event if you qualify, especially for students or individuals, but as well as nonprofit groups. They're not enough probably to pull off. We haven't asked about individual costs of all these installations over the years, but they're usually not enough to quite cover that. But
I would say I really do appreciate the kind of accessibility that the festival has, right? It's not trying to be so highbrow that it's supposed to be about design for everyone, which I really appreciate. And I think it's something that you guys what you're talking about right now is all really important. I guess the one thing I would say, I think we found ourselves at Olson Kundig trying to partner with groups that we already know that need help with something.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, kind of thinking of those original kind of rumbles, Trevor, of like if you guys even like, kind of matchmaker, or like, hey, X, Y, and Z, like would you just pairing folks that are like that maybe we have no common interest right now, but on paper, and then like the way that we could use design to help empower a group that maybe couldn't do it on their own, I think could be really fascinating too, right?
Well, that's a good segue. So I think Tyler, do you have the dates? There are 2 events we're going to hold prior to submission, called mixers this year, which are going back a little bit towards the come and hang out and meet folks. What we've run in the past is we'll find a few nonprofit folks, but then there's just so many designers, and then they all have their own ideas to go do their own thing, and actually getting the pairing to happen without doing like the Rumble where it's explicitly like, to be involved with this, you are going to be X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Has been harder. So we try to make it available by doing these events where people can meet, and we do a lot of front work of inviting folks to that. But there's still probably something that can be done mechanically to kind of make it so it's available. But so if people go to this address here, there's a mixer tomorrow, which means not many folks will see this. And then
that was on the 19th, isn't that?
That it's 2 days. Sorry, Wednesday. And then there's also going to be one on May 4th as well, which I think is the larger one. I think the one on Wednesday is I think they only have capacity for like 25 people or something like that. But that's ongoing, and that will probably continue throughout the year. Because I think there could be something to be done where we have folks submit things, and then you can kind of find out about groups who there may be natural pairings. We do suggest that in cases like there are certain things that get submitted, especially for the block party, and our team will sort of say, hey, this is interesting, have you talked to this group or these folks to find some natural pairings. But yes, it's still some people like Olson Kundig has been like, it's directly kind of ingrained into the proposal. And others, there's some work to be done on certain, but everybody's got a different idea.
Totally, which makes it fun too, right? And special.
Keeps it flexible.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing I like over the Rumble is that it's scarier in that anybody can do whatever, but it does allow it to extend beyond. But then we give up on that kind of power as an organization to kind of make a difference on kind of a larger scale by putting it back on the partners.
Right.
Any other stuff before we run off? We're at an hour.
Yeah, we're excited to see your proposal this year.
Yeah.
Are you working on it?
Not currently. So let me know.
You got lots of time.
The call for proposals is out.
I know.
Yeah. So call for proposals is out.
I need to come to the mixer and see what's going on there. Obviously.
Yes.
But well, no, I would just like to say, Trevor, I know you've been a big ally and support of some of the stuff I've been doing over the years with the festival, and you've put a lot of time into it. And Tyler, appreciate your time too here. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Well, thanks for doing it. You're one of the originals.
Crazy.
There's maybe a handful of people who've been involved in nearly every single year. It's quite the deal.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well,
it's been fun.
Like
it's a great outlet to have.
Call for proposals is out for anybody watching. There's a QR code with a link, or you go to cdesignfest.org for more. The deadline for call for proposals is May 25th, so nearly June. So it's much later this year, which gives folks more time.
And the festival still, is it early September or one of the dates?
So Block Party, we can say that. Block Party will officially be August 19th and 20th.
Okay, it's that's right, it's August.
So same weekend as last year, early. Yeah, we've creeped forward over the years. Those early pictures you have, I think, are in late September.
That's right.
In fact, that one year you've got the tires. That's the year we had the downpour rain, where all that work that John Gentry and Kathleen did to chalk out all the leaves on the bricks or whatever.
Washed away.
Washed away before the event started.
You just never know in the Northwest.
I know. August is a better bet, but for sure.
Totally.
So.
Cool.
Alrighty, well, thank you, Clay.
Thanks again, fellas. Appreciate the time.
See everybody, and I'm going to run our outro here.